He had been searching for weeks, wandering through crowded markets and abandoned docks, looking for something unusual, something that could change his life. He didn't know exactly what it would be, but he had a feeling he'd know it when he saw it. That was how he ended up in the far corner of the market, in a section that smelled of burnt metal and oil. The place was dark and quiet compared to the rest of the city, with broken-down equipment stacked in piles, and the occasional clank of a loose panel echoing in the air. Among the rusted parts and old machinery, something caught his eye. It was a spacecraft, or at least, that's what it looked like. Its metal hull was scratched and dented, panels hanging loose in strange angles. The paint was faded and peeling, and wires stuck out of its body like broken veins. Most people would have walked past it without a second glance. But something about it drew him in. Maybe it was the shape of it, sleek but strange. Or maybe it was the feeling that it had a story waiting to be told. He approached cautiously, circling it and examining every part he could reach. The ship was small, almost compact, but it looked like it had been built for speed and agility. Some of the panels were scorched, as if it had been in a battle long ago. A small screen flickered weakly inside, showing nothing but static. Most people would have called it a junkyard piece, a heap of metal to be sold for parts. But he saw potential. He could fix it. He could make it fly again. A man standing nearby, the seller, noticed his interest. He was old, with a face full of wrinkles, and he had eyes that seemed to have seen everything. He grinned, showing a row of missing teeth. "Thinking of buying that?" the man asked, his voice rough. "It's a wreck, you know. Nobody's flown that in years." The human smiled, shrugging. "I can fix it." The man laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Fix it? Ha! You'll be lucky if it doesn't explode while you're touching it. That thing's cursed, they say." He raised an eyebrow. "Cursed?" "Yeah," the man said, leaning closer. "Some folks say it belonged to a trader who disappeared. Others say it has a mind of its own. You sure you want it?" He hesitated for a moment. A mind of its own? That sounded more like a challenge than a warning. He had always liked challenges. He nodded. "I'll take it." The seller's eyes widened slightly. "You're serious?" "Yes," he said firmly. "I can handle it." The transaction was quick. He paid the price he had saved for months, feeling a rush of excitement mixed with nervousness. People watched him as he pushed and pulled the ship out of the market, navigating narrow alleyways and stacks of machinery. It was heavier than it looked, but he didn't mind. The ship felt alive in his hands, almost like it was waiting for him. By the time he reached his workshop, the sun was setting. He parked the ship in the middle of the room and looked at it from a distance. The shadows made it look even stranger, more mysterious. He ran his hands over the hull, tracing the scratches and dents, imagining the stories behind each one. He started inspecting it carefully, panel by panel. He opened compartments, checked wires, and tested every connection. Most of it was old, but some of the systems flickered to life when he touched them, as if responding to his presence. He smiled, feeling a thrill of anticipation. As he worked, he noticed a small door tucked away behind a loose panel near the bottom of the ship. It was hidden so well that it almost looked like it wasn't part of the ship at all. His curiosity spiked. He knelt down and gently pried it open. Inside was not what he expected. There was no engine, no cargo, no storage. There was a space, dark and warm, and it moved slightly. He froze. Something was breathing inside. Suddenly, a low growl filled the chamber, vibrating through the metal floor. He jumped back, heart racing. The growl grew louder, and a pair of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. He had never seen anything like it. The creature was massive, with scales that shimmered faintly under the dim light of the workshop. Its wings were folded tightly, and its tail flicked back and forth, knocking over a toolbox. It stared at him, unblinking, its expression one of irritation and suspicion. You're alive," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The creature growled again, a sound that was both terrifying and oddly intelligent. It had clearly been sleeping or waiting inside the ship, and it did not appreciate being disturbed. He took a cautious step forward. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, keeping his hands raised. "I just didn't expect to find you." The dragon-like creature hissed, baring sharp teeth, and then slammed its massive claw on the floor. A panel flew off and bounced across the room. He ducked instinctively. It was clear that the ship and the creature were connected in some way. The ship had not been broken. It had been guarding something extraordinary. He spent hours observing it, trying to understand. The creature seemed grumpy, annoyed at his presence, but it did not attack. It moved carefully, almost calculating every motion. Its eyes followed him wherever he went. Intelligent and curious. By midnight, he had managed to calm it slightly, offering water and some of the protein packs he had in the workshop. It sniffed them suspiciously, but eventually took a small bite. That was the first small victory he had with it. He realized that this was no ordinary find. He had thought he was buying a broken ship, but in reality, he had bought something alive, something ancient and powerful. The thought made his pulse quicken. He had no idea how to communicate with it yet, but he knew one thing: this ship was not just a machine. It had a heart, a mind, and maybe even a personality. He sat back, exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had stumbled onto something truly unique. The ship had chosen him, or maybe the creature inside had. Either way, he knew that his life was about to change in ways he could not imagine. As he watched the creature settle into a corner, eyes still glowing faintly in the dark, he made a silent promise to himself. He would figure this out. He would learn its ways, understand the ship, and maybe even earn its trust. Little did he know, this grumpy alien dragon was not going to make it easy for him. It had a temper, a mind of its own, and a long memory of the universe it had seen. But the human was determined. And so, in the quiet of the workshop, surrounded by metal and shadows, an unlikely partnership was about to begin, one that would test patience, courage, and the limits of what he thought was possible. By the time he finally went to sleep that night, he was more excited than he had been in years. Not because of the ship, not because of the adventure it promised, but because he had met something extraordinary. Something that had waited for him, hidden away, grumpy and defiant, ready to challenge every expectation he had about life, the universe, and himself. And in that moment, he realized one very important truth. He had not bought a broken ship. He had bought a companion. He woke up early the next morning, the pale light of dawn streaming through the cracks of the workshop. The ship sat in the middle of the room, silent for the first time since he had brought it in. But he knew better than to assume the dragon had gone back to sleep. Its glowing eyes had a way of making him feel watched, even when he wasn't looking directly at it. He took a deep breath and approached slowly. The creature was sitting in the hidden chamber again, curling its tail around itself like it owned the place, which, as far as he could tell, it did. He knelt a few steps away, careful not to make sudden movements. "Good morning," he said softly. "I didn't mean to wake you yesterday." The dragon hissed lightly in response, flicking its tail. It wasn't aggressive, but it was clear it was annoyed. He stayed still, watching it. Its scales shifted with the dim light, shimmering in colors he couldn't name. Its wings twitched now and then, as if itching to unfold, but it kept them folded tightly. He needed to figure out a way to communicate, or at least make it trust him enough to allow him to work on the ship. He remembered a trick from working with animals on Earth. Patience, consistency, small gestures. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of protein bar. Slowly, he extended it toward the dragon. The creature's eyes narrowed, suspicious. He didn't move closer, letting it make the choice. After a tense moment, it sniffed the bar carefully and took a tiny bite. That was progress. Small, but important. Over the next few hours, he worked on the ship, keeping one eye on the dragon at all times. He cleaned loose panels, checked the engine, and tested the old navigation system. Each time the dragon made a noise, a low growl, a hiss, or a snort, he paused to see what had triggered it. Sometimes it was the sound of a tool scraping metal. Other times it was his footsteps on the floor. Slowly, he began to understand that the creature wasn't just grumpy. It was aware, very aware, of everything around it. By mid-morning, he decided to try something bolder. He approached the dragon slowly, holding his hands out to show he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I just want to understand you." The dragon studied him for a long time. Its eyes followed his every move, blinking occasionally, but never taking its gaze off him. Then it did something unexpected. It nudged the piece of protein bar with its snout, rolling it closer to him as if testing whether he would take it. He smiled and left it there. A small step, but it felt huge. For the first time, it seemed like the dragon was curious about him rather than immediately hostile. He spent the rest of the day experimenting carefully with the ship. He pressed buttons, turned dials, and watched the dragon's reactions. Each flicker of light, each whir of the engine, made the dragon twitch or move. At times, he thought it was going to lash out, but it never did. It seemed more irritated than angry, almost like a grumpy cat testing a human's patience. He realized that the ship was more than just metal and circuits. The dragon was somehow connected to it. When he pressed a button, the lights inside the ship dimmed or brightened, and the dragon reacted. When he tried to move the ship manually, the dragon's tail flicked, stopping him from doing it wrong. It was as if the ship had a mind, but the mind was shared with the dragon. By evening, he had made a small breakthrough. He found a console in the ship that seemed to respond to voice commands. He tried a few simple phrases, mostly things like "open panel" or "activate lights." The ship obeyed, and the dragon's eyes followed each command. He felt a thrill of excitement. This was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Still, the dragon wasn't fully trusting him. It hissed when he got too close, and it made low growls whenever he tried to open a panel it considered private. He realized that if he wanted to use the ship properly, he needed to earn its trust, not just force it to obey. Over the next few days, he settled into a routine. He would wake early, check on the dragon, and offer small gestures, water, food, or gentle movements. He would then work on the ship, making careful adjustments, always watching for reactions. The dragon began to relax slightly, though it was still grumpy. Sometimes it would follow him around the workshop, its tail swishing, its eyes blinking in what he could only describe as curiosity. One morning, he decided to test the ship's engines. He pressed a few buttons and heard the hum of the main engine coming to life. The dragon stiffened immediately, wings twitching as if ready to take flight. He froze, unsure if it would attack or allow it. The humming continued, growing louder, and the dragon tilted its head. Then, slowly, it stepped aside. He exhaled, a mix of relief and excitement. The dragon hadn't stopped the engine. That was progress. He realized something important. This creature wasn't just guarding the ship. It was guiding it, teaching it, or maybe teaching him. It had been alone for a long time, waiting for someone who could understand it, someone who could earn its trust. And now, he was that someone, whether he was ready or not. By the end of the week, they had a rhythm. The dragon allowed him to work closer, and the ship responded better to his touch. He discovered hidden compartments, secret controls, and old maps stored digitally in the ship's memory. The dragon seemed to approve, though it still had a grumpy expression, its eyes narrowing whenever he made a mistake. One evening, he tried talking to it differently. Instead of giving commands, he spoke softly about himself, about why he had come here, why he had bought the ship, why he wanted an adventure. The dragon listened, tilting its head, blinking slowly. He didn't know if it understood the words, but he felt a connection. It wasn't just a creature. It was a being with thoughts, feelings, and a past dot as the days passed. He realized that life with the dragon was going to be unpredictable. Sometimes it would sleep for hours, curled up in its chamber. Other times it would wake suddenly, hiss, and knock over a tool or two just to assert itself. He learned to anticipate its moods, to give it space when it needed it, and to approach slowly when it was curious. The more he worked on the ship, the more he realized how wrong he had been about it. He had thought it was broken, a useless piece of metal he could fix. But it wasn't broken at all. It was alive, connected to the dragon in a way he didn't yet fully understand. And the dragon, as grumpy as it was not just a guardian, it was a partner, a teacher, a companion for the adventure that awaited them both. By the end of that second week, he was exhausted but exhilarated. He had learned patience, learned to read the dragon's moods, and even managed to get it to allow him to touch some parts of the ship freely. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And he knew that the real challenge was just beginning. He sat on a stool, watching the dragon curl up for the night. Its eyes blinked slowly, almost as if it was acknowledging him. He whispered, "Tomorrow, we'll try something new. I promise." The dragon huffed softly, a sound that seemed like a mix of amusement and annoyance. And for the first time, he felt like they were on the same team, even if only a little. He went to sleep that night with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The dragon was still grumpy, still unpredictable, but it was learning to trust him. And he was learning to respect it. Together, they were going to discover just how powerful, strange, and extraordinary this ship and this partnership could be. He didn't know where it would lead, but he knew one thing. He had never felt more alive, more curious, and more ready for adventure in his life. The grumpy alien dragon, the ship that wasn't broken, and the mysteries that lay ahead were now his reality. And somehow, he was ready for it. The next morning, the workshop was quiet, almost peaceful, though he knew it would not last. He had learned by now that the dragon's moods could change in an instant, like clouds shifting in a storm. He approached slowly, careful not to startle it, and found it sitting upright, eyes glowing faintly in the early light. Its wings twitched occasionally, but it stayed still, watching him with a wary intelligence. He decided that today would be different. He wanted to understand more not just the ship, but the dragon itself. The creature had been grumpy, territorial, and unpredictable, but there was something else about it too. A spark of curiosity, a depth of thought he couldn't quite name, and a strength that was both physical and mental. It was obvious that this dragon was not an ordinary being. He reached into his pocket and took out a small folded cloth. Inside it were a few protein bars and some water packets. He offered them slowly, placing them on the floor in front of the dragon. At first, it ignored them, eyes narrowing suspiciously. Then, after a long pause, it leaned forward, sniffed, and took one of the bars in its claw. He smiled softly, feeling a tiny victory. Trust was being built slowly, one small gesture at a time. Once it had eaten, he carefully approached the ship, keeping one hand visible and moving slowly. The dragon watched, its eyes following every motion, but it did not growl. He knelt by the main console, tracing his fingers over the old buttons and screens. The ship had systems he didn't yet understand. but they responded to him in small ways, lights flickering, panels opening slightly, and a soft hum of energy that ran through the floor. He realized something important. The dragon wasn't just guarding the ship. It was part of the ship, connected in ways he couldn't explain. When the dragon moved, the ship seemed to respond. When he touched certain buttons, the dragon would tilt its head or flick its tail, almost as if guiding him. He had not just bought a ship. He had bought a partnership with a living being who had seen more of the universe than he could imagine. Hours passed as he experimented with the ship's controls, always keeping one eye on the dragon. He learned how to open hidden compartments, activate the navigation systems, and even start the small energy thrusters for testing. Each success was met with a flick of the dragon's tail or a low hum from deep in its throat. He began to understand that it approved of certain actions and disapproved of others. During a quiet moment, he decided to try something risky. He pressed a button labeled in an alien script he could not read, and the ship responded immediately. Panels shifted, revealing a small chamber he hadn't seen before. He peeked inside and found a set of intricate tools, devices he had never encountered, and small scroll-like data pads filled with symbols that seemed to move when he looked at them. The dragon hissed sharply, stepping forward, wings flaring slightly. Its eyes glowed brighter, and he froze. It wasn't angry exactly. It was warning him, reminding him that this was its territory, and some things were not to be handled carelessly. He nodded slowly, stepping back. "I understand," he whispered. "I'll be careful." For the rest of the day, he focused on smaller tasks, learning how the ship responded to commands and how the dragon interacted with him. Sometimes it would approach and touch a part of the ship with its claw, and the screen would light up in response. Sometimes it would simply observe him, head tilted, eyes blinking slowly. It was clear that the dragon had knowledge, intelligence, and a sense of purpose. By evening, he had made significant progress. He could operate parts of the ship without causing alarms, and the dragon seemed to relax slightly, curling its tail around a panel and watching him with what he could only describe as cautious interest. He realized that he was not just learning about the ship. He was learning about the dragon itself. Its moods, its reactions, and even its humor, though subtle, were becoming clearer. As he cleaned up tools for the night, the dragon moved closer, sniffing the air around him. He stayed still, not wanting to scare it. To his surprise, it nudged a small panel toward him, revealing a hidden compartment he had not noticed before. Inside was a small device, glowing faintly. He picked it up carefully, examining it. The dragon watched silently, but there was no growl, no hiss, just observation. He realized something then. The dragon was testing him in its own way. It was teaching him patience, caution, and respect. And in return, he was beginning to understand its language, not words, but gestures, sounds, and movements. He had expected a simple, grumpy creature, but this was far more complex. The next morning, he decided to attempt a small test. He wanted to see if the dragon would allow him to operate one of the ship's thrusters. Carefully, he approached, hands open, and spoke softly. "I want to try something." "You won't get hurt. I just want to understand." The dragon watched him carefully, tilting its head. For a moment, he thought it might refuse entirely. Then, slowly, it stepped aside. He held his breath and activated the thruster. A small, controlled burst of energy lifted the ship slightly from the floor, enough for him to see the engines respond. The dragon's eyes narrowed, wings twitching, but it didn't intervene. He exhaled, a mixture of relief and excitement flooding him. He had earned a small measure of trust. The dragon was beginning to accept him, though cautiously, and the ship had acknowledged his ability to handle it responsibly. Over the next few days, they settled into a rhythm. He would offer food and water, observe the dragon, and then carefully test small systems of the ship. The dragon would respond, sometimes with approval, sometimes with irritation, but always with intelligence. He realized that this partnership required patience, respect, and attention to detail. He could not rush it, and he could not force it. One evening, as the sun set and the workshop was bathed in warm orange light, he sat on a stool and watched the dragon curl up in its chamber. Its eyes blinked slowly, and for the first time, he thought he saw something resembling understanding in them. He whispered, "We're learning, you and I one day. We'll figure this out together." The dragon let out a soft, rumbling sound, almost like an acknowledgement. It was subtle, but to him, it meant progress. They were no longer strangers. They were a team, learning each other's limits, strengths, and quirks. That night, he lay on a cot nearby, unable to sleep fully. He thought about the journey ahead, the mysteries of the ship, the dragon's abilities, and the adventures waiting in space. He had bought what he thought was a broken ship, expecting an ordinary project. Instead, he had discovered a living, intelligent companion who would challenge him, teach him, and ultimately change his life as he drifted toward sleep. He realized one truth: this grumpy dragon and the ship it guarded were more than he could have imagined. And though he didn't know what the future held, he was ready to face it. Together, they would explore the stars, uncover secrets, and learn from each other in ways he could not yet understand. And somewhere deep in his mind, he smiled at the thought that this was only the beginning. The real adventure was just starting. The following days were filled with steady progress, but he could sense that the real challenge was approaching. The dragon, though calmer than before, remained unpredictable. It would sometimes flare its wings suddenly, knock over tools, or make low hissing sounds when he got too close to certain panels. Each incident reminded him that he was not just working on a ship, he was working alongside a living, intelligent, and very grumpy being. He had started keeping detailed notes of everything. Every flick of the dragon's tail, every growl, every movement of the ship that seemed to respond to it. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The dragon reacted to both his actions and the ship's energy. When he pressed a button incorrectly, it would hiss. When he approached a compartment it considered important, it would subtly block him. And when he handled something with care and respect, it would step aside, or even nudge the panel toward him in what seemed like approval. He realized that understanding the dragon was as important as understanding the ship. Both were connected, and both needed his patience and focus. This realization gave him a new sense of purpose. It was no longer about fixing a machine. It was about building a partnership with a creature that had likely outlived most beings in the galaxy. One morning, while running a diagnostic on the engine, he noticed something unusual. A small panel at the rear of the ship glowed faintly. Curious, he reached for it, and the dragon immediately flared its wings, hissing sharply. He froze, holding his hands up in surrender. The dragon's eyes narrowed, glowing brighter, as if it were warning him to stop. He stepped back slowly, observing. Then, slowly, he spoke softly. "I'm not trying to harm it. I just want to understand." The dragon's posture relaxed slightly, though its eyes remained alert. Tentatively, he pressed the panel again, and this time, instead of an angry hiss, there was a low rumble, almost like a growl of curiosity. The panel slid open to reveal a set of controls he had never seen. Lights blinked in patterns, screens displayed alien symbols, and a soft hum filled the workshop. He realized that this was the ship's central control system, the heart of everything it could do, and the dragon was clearly the key to operating it fully. Without its cooperation, he would never unlock the ship's full potential. Over the next few days, he began experimenting carefully. He would activate small systems while the dragon watched, noting every reaction. Sometimes it would hiss and block a panel. Other times it would step aside, allowing him to continue. Slowly, he learned to read its signals, adjusting his actions based on its behavior. The ship responded beautifully to this cooperation, systems activating smoothly when the dragon approved, and locking down when it didn single quotes T. One afternoon, he decided to try something ambitious. He wanted to test the ship's navigation system, something that required both his input and the dragon's cooperation. He approached the console slowly, speaking softly as he worked. The dragon followed closely, wings twitching, tail flicking, but it didn't interfere. He entered a few commands, activating the thrusters lightly and testing directional controls. The ship lifted slightly off the ground, hovering a few inches, while the dragon observed intently. He adjusted the balance, keeping a careful eye on the creature's reactions. Each successful maneuver was met with a subtle nod or a low rumble from the dragon, a signal that he was on the right track. As the days passed, their teamwork grew stronger. He learned to anticipate the dragon's reactions, and the dragon seemed to trust him more. Sometimes it would approach him, brushing its massive claw against his shoulder lightly, as if acknowledging him. It was a small gesture, but it meant more than words could express. One evening, as he was closing up the workshop, he noticed movement outside. Shadows shifted, and he caught glimpses of figures lurking near the entrance. Alarm bells went off in his mind. The ship had been hidden, and he had assumed it was safe. But now, it seemed that someone or something had found out about it. He activated a small defensive shield around the workshop, a feature he had discovered in the ship's controls. The dragon hissed, wings flaring in alarm. He placed a hand on its snout, speaking softly. "It's okay. I've got this." The figures outside moved closer, and he could see that they were scavengers, people who dealt in stolen technology and illegal goods. They had likely heard rumors about the ship and had come to see if it was worth taking. He knew he couldn't fight them off alone, and the dragon wasn't going to let anyone touch its ship. He took a deep breath and approached the central console. "We need to work together," he said quietly. The dragon hissed, but there was a tension in its body that suggested it understood. He activated the ship's systems, and panels shifted, lights blinking in warning patterns. The dragon roared, a sound that filled the workshop and echoed outside, sending the intruders stumbling back in surprise. It was the first time he had seen the dragon fully assert its power. Its wings unfurled slightly, claws scraping the metal floor, and its eyes glowed brighter than ever. The intruders froze, clearly terrified, and then scattered, running into the shadows from where they had come. He exhaled, heart racing. "That worked," he said, looking at the dragon. The creature huffed softly, wings settling back against its body, and nudged a panel toward him. It was as if it were saying, "Well done. You did your part." Over the next few days, he reinforced the workshop, making sure the ship and the dragon were secure. He realized that while he had learned a lot about the dragon and the ship, the real danger lay outside. People would come, curious or greedy, wanting the ship for themselves, and the dragon would protect it, but only if he acted wisely alongside it. He also noticed something else. The ship seemed to respond to the dragon's emotions. When it was calm, systems worked smoothly. When it was agitated, lights flickered, thrusters spun, and panels moved erratically. He began to understand that maintaining the dragon's trust and comfort was as important as pressing the right buttons. This realization changed everything. The dragon wasn't just a grumpy companion. It was a co-pilot, a partner in every sense. Its moods, reactions, and intelligence directly affected the ship's performance. To operate the ship safely, he needed the dragon's cooperation fully, and that meant patience, respect, and careful attention to its behavior. One evening, as he sat beside the ship, he spoke softly to the dragon. "I know this is strange. You've been alone for a long time, and now I'm here. But we can do this together. I'll listen. I'll learn. I won't hurt you." The dragon blinked slowly, and for a brief moment, its expression softened. It wasn't affection exactly, but it was an acknowledgement. It was saying, in its own way, that it understood. He realized then that the journey ahead was not just about adventure in space. It was about building trust, learning to work together, and discovering the full potential of the ship and the dragon. They were a team now, and any challenge that came their way would have to be faced together. As he prepared to sleep that night, he thought about the days to come. The dragon's abilities, the ship's power, and the dangers outside all promised challenges. But for the first time, he felt ready. Not because he knew everything, but because he understood the importance of trust, patience, and cooperation. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that this partnership with a grumpy, intelligent alien dragon and a ship that was far from ordinary was the start of something extraordinary. They had survived the first test together, and the universe beyond the workshop was waiting. Tomorrow, he would push the boundaries further. He would explore the ship's hidden features, learn more about the dragon, and prepare for whatever threats the galaxy might throw at them. And with each day, their bond would grow stronger. A human and a dragon learning to navigate the stars together. The days that followed were tense. He had learned to work alongside the dragon, understanding its moods and reactions, but the outside world was becoming more unpredictable. Rumors of the strange ship and its unusual occupant had spread beyond the market, reaching ears that sought profit or power. He had known that it was only a matter of time before someone came to claim it. One morning, while he was checking the ship's engines, a shadow fell across the workshop floor. He looked up and froze. Figures were moving in the doorway, their presence deliberate and cautious. They were not scavengers like before. These were trained, organized, and clearly knew what they wanted. Their eyes locked on the ship, and for a moment, the workshop seemed impossibly small. He felt the dragon stiffen beside him, its tail curling tightly around its body. Its eyes glowed brighter, and a low rumble vibrated through the metal floor. He whispered, "We've got company," and the dragon responded with a hiss that made the intruders hesitate. He had no time to prepare weapons or defenses. But he knew one thing. The dragon was powerful, and the ship itself could respond. He activated the control console slowly, keeping his movements deliberate. The ship hummed softly, and panels shifted as if it was waking fully for the first time. The dragon's wings flared slightly, claws scraping the floor in anticipation. The intruders stepped closer, weapons raised, moving cautiously toward the ship. They seemed to underestimate the creature inside, assuming it was just a defensive measure. That was their mistake. With a sudden roar, the dragon leapt from its chamber, wings spreading wide, claws extended. The intruders stumbled back, startled by its size and speed. Its roar shook the walls of the workshop, echoing through the neighborhood, and for a moment he feared it might lose control. But then he remembered the trust they had built, the signals he had learned to read. He spoke softly, easy, calm. "We can handle this." The dragon hesitated, eyes flicking to him, then back to the intruders. It was clear it was listening, weighing its next move. He pressed a few buttons on the console, activating the ship's defensive systems. Shields rose with a soft whirring sound, creating a barrier between them and the intruders. Lights flickered across the workshop, and small energy pulses emitted from the panels, signaling the readiness of the ship. The intruders advanced anyway, confident they could overpower a human and a creature they did not understand. They were wrong. The dragon lunged, knocking one off his feet with a swipe of its tail. Another was thrown against a wall by a sudden shift of the ship's floor panels. The hum of energy from the console grew louder, reacting to the dragon's movements. And the intruders realized quickly that they were not facing an ordinary ship. He moved carefully, watching both the dragon and the attackers. The creature was fierce, but it was also controlled, and he realized something crucial. The ship and the dragon were connected in more ways than he had understood. Every movement, every reaction seemed to flow between them. If he wanted to survive, he needed to cooperate fully with the dragon, not just watch. He reached out slowly, touching the console and speaking softly. "Focus with me. We're together in this." The dragon's eyes flickered, and it seemed to acknowledge him. It backed slightly, giving him space to operate the controls, and together they created a coordinated defense. Panels shifted, energy barriers reinforced, and lights flashed in warning patterns. The intruders, realizing they had underestimated their opponents, hesitated. He knew he couldn't fight them head-on for long, but he could use the ship's systems and the dragon's power to make them retreat. Carefully, he activated a small series of energy pulses that pushed back the intruders without causing permanent harm. The dragon added its strength, swiping and roaring, making the attackers scatter in panic. When the last intruder had fled, he exhaled deeply, heart pounding, and looked at the dragon. Its wings were folded, tail curling gently, and it let out a soft rumble, a sound that seemed like satisfaction. He reached out and touched its snout lightly. "We did it," he whispered. "Together." The experience had taught him a lot. The dragon was not just grumpy or territorial. It was a protector, a being with instinct, intelligence, and loyalty. The ship was not just a machine. It was alive in a way that required respect and cooperation. Together, they had defended themselves against forces that were far stronger than he could have managed alone. Over the next few days, he focused on strengthening both the ship and the workshop. He repaired structural weaknesses, reinforced the walls, and practiced controlling the ship's systems in tandem with the dragon. Each exercise brought them closer, teaching him how to anticipate the dragon's reactions and how to guide its actions in harmony with the ship. He also began experimenting with more advanced functions of the ship. He discovered that some panels responded to touch, others to sound, and still others to the dragon's presence. When he activated a thruster or opened a compartment, the dragon would often respond instinctively, adjusting its position, shifting its weight, or using its claws to interact with the ship. The level of coordination required amazed him, but he found it exhilarating. One evening, as they worked late, he decided to test the ship's navigational systems fully. He opened a map display that projected a three-dimensional hologram of the surrounding space. Stars, planets, and uncharted routes appeared in vivid detail. The dragon watched closely, wings twitching with interest. He moved his hands slowly over the controls, and the ship responded, zooming in on certain sectors, highlighting areas that seemed important. The dragon leaned forward slightly, tail swishing, and he realized it was helping guide him. Together, they traced a route through the stars, planning a journey he had never imagined he could take. It was in that moment he understood the true nature of their partnership. The dragon was not just a guardian. It was a navigator, a co-pilot, and a teacher. Its intelligence and instincts complemented the ship's systems perfectly. He could not operate the ship without it, and it relied on him to interact with the human world and make decisions carefully. The thought excited him. The universe beyond the workshop was vast, full of possibilities and dangers. But with the dragon by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The previous encounters with intruders had been a warning, a reminder that the galaxy was not safe, and that others would come seeking what they had. But it was also proof that they could survive together against any threat. He spent the night watching the dragon as it curled up in its chamber, eyes glowing softly. He reached out and rested his hand gently on its scales, feeling the warmth beneath. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "we'll go further. We'll see what the ship can do, and we'll be ready for anyone who comes for us." The dragon blinked slowly, and he felt a subtle acknowledgement. It was a simple gesture, but it meant trust. It meant partnership. It meant that they were ready to face the universe together. And as he finally drifted to sleep, he realized that this was no longer just a ship or a dragon or even a workshop. It was a team, a bond that combined human ingenuity with alien strength and intelligence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was no longer alone. He had a companion unlike any other, and together they were capable of far more than he had ever imagined. The universe outside the workshop was waiting. And he, the human who had bought what he thought was a broken ship, was finally ready to explore it with a grumpy, intelligent dragon by his side. The morning was quiet, the first rays of sunlight creeping slowly across the workshop floor. He stood beside the ship, feeling the smooth metal under his hands, and glanced at the dragon, which was already awake, stretching its wings and tail with a low, rumbling growl of satisfaction. It was a sound he had come to understand as contentment. They had faced intruders, navigated the ship together, and survived challenges that would have overwhelmed anyone else. Now, it was time for the next step, the first real journey into space, that he approached the dragon carefully, keeping his hands visible. "We're ready," he said softly. "I don't know what's out there, but I want to see it with you." The dragon blinked slowly, wings twitching, then nudged him lightly with its snout. It was a small gesture, but it was enough. He felt a thrill of excitement. Together, they moved toward the ship's console. The dragon flared its wings slightly as he activated the systems. Lights flickered across the interior, panels shifted, and a soft hum filled the room. The ship was alive, more responsive than ever, and the dragon seemed to pulse with energy alongside it. He checked the controls, recalling everything he had learned over the past weeks. The ship was complex, alien, and unpredictable, but he was no longer afraid. The dragon's presence gave him confidence. They had learned to work together, anticipate each other's moves, and respond to challenges as a team. He pressed a series of buttons carefully, following the sequences that had worked in their practice sessions. The ship's engines rumbled, thrusters lifting slightly off the floor. The dragon let out a low growl, not of warning, but of excitement. He smiled, feeling the rush of anticipation. The first lift was cautious, just a few inches off the ground, but it was enough to show that the ship was responding perfectly. Panels shifted, lights glowed, and the hum of energy vibrated through the floor. He felt the connection with the dragon deepen. Every movement, every adjustment was mirrored by it. Together, they were becoming more than human and creature. They were a single unit. Sensed in thought and action dot, he guided the ship toward the exit of the workshop, carefully navigating the narrow corridors. The dragon flared its wings lightly, balancing them with the thrusters, and he could see the intelligence in its eyes, the calculation of every move. They were ready to leave, to explore the universe beyond the walls that had confined them for so long. Outside, the sky was clear, vast, and filled with possibilities. He activated the main thrusters fully, and the ship lifted off the ground smoothly, rising into the open air. The wind rushed past them, and the hum of the engines filled the space around them. He grinned, feeling the thrill of freedom. The dragon let out a low roar, wings fully extended now, tail whipping behind it. He laughed, exhilarated. They were flying as they rose higher. The city below became smaller, a patchwork of buildings and streets, and soon it disappeared entirely. The horizon stretched infinitely, stars beginning to twinkle in the approaching dusk. He felt a sense of awe he had never experienced before. This was more than adventure. It was discovery, a journey into the unknown, and he was not alone. The dragon shifted beside him, eyes scanning the surroundings. He realized it was not just alert, but guiding, instinctively sensing potential hazards and pathways. He followed its cues, adjusting the ship's trajectory in harmony with the creature's movements. For the first time, he truly understood the depth of their connection. The dragon and the ship were one, and he had become a part of that unity. They traveled for hours, exploring the clouds above, feeling the ship respond to every subtle command and movement. The dragon sometimes hissed softly, signaling caution, and sometimes nudged a lever or clawed a pedal to show approval. The process was natural, intuitive, and exhilarating. He felt alive in a way he had never known, understanding that this was the beginning of something far greater than a simple adventure got as night fell and the stars spread across the sky like a blanket of light. He decided to test one of the ship's more advanced systems, a navigation mode that could take them to previously uncharted space routes. He entered a series of commands, careful to follow everything he had learned from observing the dragon's reactions. The ship hummed, lights shifted, and a holographic map appeared, displaying paths he could scarcely comprehend. The dragon leaned forward slightly, tail flicking, eyes narrowing at certain areas of the map. He understood that it was guiding him, choosing paths that were safe or strategically advantageous. He followed its cues, adjusting course, feeling the thrill of exploration deepen with every movement. They were venturing into uncharted territory, yet he felt safe because he was not alone. The dragon was more than a companion. It was a guardian, a navigator, and a teacher all in one. Hours passed as they traveled further from the familiar skies of their home. He marveled at the beauty of distant planets, the swirl of nebulas, and the quiet vastness of space. The dragon occasionally let out low hums, perhaps in appreciation, perhaps as a signal, but he felt the rhythm of their partnership growing stronger. Every flick of its tail, every movement of its wings, was a language he was beginning to understand fully. Suddenly, the ship's sensors detected movement nearby, an unknown vessel, sleek and fast, approaching quickly. He felt a pang of tension, but remembered the lessons he had learned. Trust in the dragon, cooperation, and calmness would guide them. He pressed a few buttons, activating the ship's defensive systems, and the dragon leaned into the controls instinctively, wings flaring slightly as they prepared to respond. The approaching ship did not fire immediately, but it was clear that it had been tracking them. The dragon hissed softly, eyes narrowing, and he understood that it was assessing the threat. He stayed calm, speaking gently to it. "We can handle this, together." With a coordinated motion, the dragon adjusted the ship's energy fields while he guided the controls. Lights flashed, thrusters fired, and they moved in perfect synchronization, evading potential attack routes while maintaining their course. The approaching vessel, unable to anticipate their moves, eventually veered away, retreating into the distance. He exhaled deeply, feeling both relief and exhilaration. The dragon gave a low, satisfied rumble, brushing its head against a panel as if to say, "Well done." He smiled, feeling the depth of their bond. They had faced a challenge together, relying not just on technology, but on trust, intelligence, and teamwork. As the hours stretched into the night, he realized that this journey was only beginning. The universe was vast, full of mystery, danger, and wonder. Yet he felt ready, because he was no longer alone. The dragon was beside him, a grumpy but brilliant companion, guiding him, protecting him, and teaching him in ways he could never have imagined. Eventually, they found a quiet place in orbit around a distant planet, a serene spot where the stars reflected off the atmosphere in shimmering colors. He shut down the main systems partially to allow the ship to rest, and the dragon curled up beside the central console, eyes glowing faintly. He sat nearby, feeling the warmth of its body and the hum of the ship beneath his fingers. For the first time, he allowed himself to reflect. He had bought what he thought was a broken ship, expecting a project, a challenge, maybe an adventure. Instead, he had found a living, intelligent dragon and a vessel unlike any other. Together, they had survived threats, learned each other's strengths and limits, and now they were ready to explore the stars as a team. He reached out, resting his hand on the dragon's scales. "We did it," he whispered. "We're ready for anything now." The dragon blinked slowly, a low hum vibrating through its chest, a subtle gesture of trust and approval. He smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection and accomplishment. They were no longer human and dragon. Ship and passenger, they were a team, bound by experience, trust, and the excitement of what lay ahead. As he settled down for the night, he looked out into the infinite expanse of space, imagining the worlds they could discover, the challenges they could face, and the adventures that awaited them. He had never felt more alive, more curious, or more ready. And he knew, without a doubt, that the dragon felt the same. The stars stretched endlessly before them, and he realized one truth. This was not the end of their story. It was the beginning. Together, they would explore, learn, and face the universe in ways neither could have imagined alone. And for the first time in his life, he felt completely certain that he had found exactly what he was meant to find.